All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started, and just wanted to say welcome to everyone and thanks for attending today's webinar on supercharging your ESXi deployment with PowerCLI. I'm Andy Serwich, and with me today is Adam Bertram. How's it going, Adam?
Hello, I'm doing pretty good, Andy.
Cool, cool. If you want to advance the slide, I'll cover our agenda for the day. So really quick, while I'm thinking about it, I want to share my webcam here. I always forget about that. So there we go. Okay, so cover our agenda for the day. Really what we're here to talk about is PowerShell, PowerCLI, and deployment, right? So kind of the gist of our presentation today is going to be first covering some of the basics around PowerShell and PowerCLI, and Adam does a great job of covering that type of material. And then from there, being as we're talking about deployment, you're going to see a demo a little bit later today that kind of, answers the question of what can I do with PowerShell and PowerCLI. We're going to cover a little bit of deployment scenarios, and then we'll be showing some additional resources. So to go down our list here, we're first going to cover PowerShell and some PowerShell modules and the whole idea of PowerShell modules. Then we're going to ask the question of why use PowerShell. Then we're going to go into an intro of PowerCLI, and then we're going to get to the demos, and hopefully the demo gods will be kind to us today as we do our demos. So from there, we're going to cover a couple of additional resources that you can use to learn more about PowerShell and PowerCLI. And then we're going to get into a Q&A. A real quick thing about the Q&A. If you want to hold your questions to the end of the webinar, we'll answer as many questions as we can throughout the end of the webinar during the Q&A session. And then just so people know, this webinar is being recorded, and any questions that we don't get to, we usually answer in a follow-up blog post out at the Altaro.com VMware blog. So stay tuned for that if your question doesn't get answered today. So let's get started with some introductions. Advance the slide, there we go. So again, my name is Andy Serwich. I'm a technical evangelist with Altaro Software, and I've been around the industry for quite a while. I've spent many, many years doing support for internal IT departments, doing support for managed services providers. I've spent a lot of time with VMware, Linux, network security, and just virtualization in general. Even though I'm a Microsoft MVP and Hyper-V, I have spent a lot of time working with the vSphere platform. During my last job, one of my primary job duties was caring for a private cloud practice that was entirely built on the vSphere platform. I remember cutting my teeth on ESX 3.0 and 3.5, so I very much had my feet in the VMware world for a long time, including PowerCLI. Now when we talk about PowerShell and PowerCLI, my experience with that has come from my experience with vSphere and Hyper-V from a virtualization administrator's perspective. I've always come up with ways to put scripts together, try and automate some of those processes that you're going to see a little bit later today. As far as blogs go, I blog quite frequently out on the Altaro.com VMware and the Altaro.com Hyper-V blogs. And if we have anyone out on Twitter today that likes to talk on Twitter, my Twitter handle's right there. I'm sorry, you'll have to spell my last name. I wasn't thinking, I guess, when I came up with my Twitter handle, but there it is all the same. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions or if you just want to have a discussion, by all means, reach out to me. So, and again, with me today is Adam Bertram. I'll hand it over to him for his introduction.
Alrighty. Thanks, Andy.
Yep.
As Andy said, I am Adam Bertram. I do a lot of PowerShell stuff. I pretty much do all PowerShell stuff these days. I do a lot of training, so I do online video courses through Pluralsight, if any of you are familiar with that company. I do a lot of PowerShell training, so I do various workshops here and there and various courses and that sort of thing. I do a whole ton of freelance writing, so I write not only on my blog, as you can see there, but I also write on sites like InfoWorld, Tom's IT Pro, MCP Mag, Redmond Mag. There's a bunch of different sites. You may have seen some of my stuff out there. I kind of get everywhere these days. And then finally, I'm a Microsoft MVP. So Andy's a Hyper-V MVP. I am actually previously a PowerShell MVP, but as of a few months ago, I am now considered a cloud and data center management MVP. So looking forward to presenting to you guys, and hope you guys like our webinar today.
Thanks, Adam. So real quick about the sponsor, Altaro Software. We're a fast-growing developer of great backup software. Our backup software is used and trusted by about 30,000 SMBs, and our flagship product is Altaro VM Backup, which provides virtualization-level backups for VMware and Hyper-V platforms. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about that application, altaro.com/vmbackup is the place to go and check that out. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Adam, and he's going to take us through some PowerShell and PowerCLI basics.
Alrighty, thanks, Andy.
Yep.
All right, so first off, I wanted to give you kind of a primer around not just PowerCLI, but anybody that might be fairly new to PowerShell, to show you kind of how PowerCLI itself is packaged up. So if you've been writing PowerShell scripts for a while, you may have just seen this, how much time you save automating this sort of thing. But however, you might not have gotten to the point of understanding the modules. Since PowerCLI is really just a set of modules you'll be interacting with, I thought it'd be a good idea just to give you a brief refresher here. So at its simplest, a module is simply like a grouping of PowerShell functions. It's a way of grouping a bunch of these functions together. In this case, it's going to be specific vSphere functions in PowerCLI. And that allows for like the easy sharing to others. A lot of vendors like VMware provide these PowerShell modules to manage their products for this very reason. And thankfully, it's really easy to use modules in PowerShell, which we'll show you here in the demo coming up. It's simply just you to place a little PSM1 file where PowerShell is looking, and then it automatically gets imported into your current session. And at that point, you use all the functions inside that module has to offer. And even though module functions don't really have to talk to APIs, most do though when provided like by a vendor like VMware here. Now vSphere has APIs that expose nearly all the functionality you do in the GUI via a programmatic interface. Now this means that when you can type new VM, for example, PowerShell goes out, makes a call to that API in vSphere, and vSphere converts all those instructions to get a VM provision. So that's just a simple example. It's simply just another interface to the product like the GUI is. So the biggest question that I always get asked is, me being such a PowerShell guy, is, well, why do I even use PowerShell at all? Well, first off, it's awesome, and second of all, all right, if you want proof, all right, I'll give you some proof here. So why use PowerShell to manage it at all? Well, you might be thinking, I can do everything in the GUI. Why do I need to learn this PowerCLI thing and fiddle with text? It's 2016 now, I don't have to deal with text anymore. Well, the answer is, most importantly, GUIs don't scale well. I'm sure there's been times when you need to orchestrate some kind of process, like bringing up a set of VMs, maybe installing VMware tools on, provisioning new hosts and all this stuff, so shutting a bunch down, whatever. The point is, doing all that takes a ton of mouse clicking, which would take a ton of time in the GUI. Plus, if you do it via the GUI, you really haven't really saved your work. You'll have to do all that exact same thing again and again and again. By using PowerCLI, you can build tools which can reuse over and over and over again, so you don't have to repeat yourself all the time. And really, if you build them right, you can use them as building blocks to build more advanced tools as you go along. And another thing to take into consideration is the wide industry support that PowerShell has. I mentioned earlier, lots of vendors, not just VMware, are releasing modules to manage their products. If you do more things in PowerShell, you can start to build these really cool tools that marry multiple products together, like pulling information from a SQL database, injecting that into vSphere somewhere, or dynamically pulling out VMs and all your hosts, and maybe inserting attributes into Active Directory, for example. So think of PowerShell as like the glue that can bind all these disparate technologies together. It's a single tool with hooks into just about anything, which allows you to build all these cool custom tools to automate your entire infrastructure. So now we're just going to start managing your entire infrastructure in PowerShell. And you are, right? Haven't I convinced you yet? Well, maybe not. Well, okay, good. Well, anyway, let's briefly go over what the PowerCLI can do for you and really what we can get into in the demos in a second. So first of all, PowerCLI is a set of PowerShell modules that, as I mentioned before, interact with the ESXi APIs. You could do this yourself without PowerCLI, but you probably have to be a software developer to directly interact with those APIs. The commandlets that come with PowerCLI, allow us administrators to manage vSphere programmatically without really having to learn, what an API is or how it works. It's just how the commandlets are really talking to the host to make stuff happen. And next, PowerCLI is not dependent on GUI changes. I'm sure you've had time in the past to where you're used to doing something in GUI one way, upgrade, and then either gone or a completely different place, making you wonder, if the developers were on acid or something. Like, why did you change this? This worked exactly like how I thought before, and now it's changed it. Well, if you use the command line, you can, with your own tools, you can build these things in a way to where, they'll hardly ever change. You have that customization and ability in the tool itself that you're building. And if you're using the PowerCLI to manage your virtual infrastructure, you don't have to worry about, any of that stuff. Since you're using that entirely different interface altogether, you aren't even affected by that stuff. So even if the developers, change something with the PowerCLI commandlet, for example, you could even build your own little proxy functions that mimic really what you're used to. So it really gives you a lot of flexibility in how you control your environment. Oh, and then I mentioned it is completely free. There's no need to purchase a license or pay out the box for a tool like this. VMware gives you it to you free of charge, not probably because they want to be nice to you, because they are a company, but because it makes working with the product so much easier, and which might make you think just how great vSphere is. All right, so we're going to go into the demos in a minute here, but for my demo in particular, I kind of wanted to give you a brief overview of what I'll be working with. So first, I'm using the PowerCLI 6.3. As of now, this is the latest version available, and since it's free, if you're in an old version, just do yourself a favor and just get it upgraded. I'd especially recommend this if you're still pre-V6, as they moved all that functionality over to those modules I told you about before from the older snap-in technology. So version 6 was a big improvement. And then I also be on PowerShell V4, I believe here, but you really don't need V4. You just need version 2 plus. But if you're still in version 2 and you can upgrade a version, at least to version 4 or version 5, I would highly recommend it. Again, it's free and it'll save you a ton of time and headache down the road. And next, we need to ensure all your hosts are at least ESXi 4.1 or greater. If not, you're probably going to be doomed to using the GUI for the rest of your career. So I highly encourage you to to get your host upgraded when you can. And you'll also need vCenter server 4.1 or greater. So now that we've got all the obligatory, most of the obligatory side deck out of the way, let's jump into the demos here and we'll see what PowerShell and PowerCLI can do. Oh, I forgot. Quick overview of the demo, of my demo. So I'll be doing a demo, and then Andy will be doing a demo after that. So this is part of my demo here. I believe he's got a slide to show his demo as well. So our first demo here that I'll be providing, it will be done by me. So in this demo, I'm going to go over how to get started with PowerCLI. Perhaps you haven't even used PowerShell at all, and PowerShell is brand new to you. You're going to get a lot out of this first demo here. So as you can see, I'll be covering some PowerShell basics, like setting the execution policy if you're just bringing up PowerShell for the first time so you can run scripts. And I'll poke around a little bit with the available commands to show you how to get around in PowerCLI. And then I'll show you how to connect to the vCenter server. This will be the first task that you do when working with the PowerCLI. And then finally, I'll then show you how we can use the PowerShell's pipeline ability to pass around VM objects to do a few things. And then we'll also package all of that knowledge up, and I'll show you how to build one of these small tools that I was telling you about earlier to easily find the total uptime of all your VMs on a host. All right, so now let's go over to the demo here, and let's hope the demo works here. All right, Andy, can you see my text okay?
Yep, looks good.
All right, great. All right, so let me run this here. All right. So, all right, the first thing we want to do is we're going to set the execution policy. Now, if you're not familiar with the execution policy is a security feature in PowerShell that is restricted went by default. So what you'll find is when you run get execution policy on your machine, you see that it's going to be restricted here. And what that means is even though we can run things on the command line that we're doing here, we can't build scripts from that. And you'll find that if you try to build a script, it'll say, if you try to execute a script, it'll say, oh, I'm not allowed to do that. You have to change your execution policy. So what I do is I always go over here and set execution policy and set it to remote signed. And now what that means is you have to, all of the scripts that come from the internet or come from an external source have to be signed with a certificate. So once I get the execution policy changed, now you can now see it's set to remote signed. And now we can actually execute scripts on the on this machine. So that's the very first thing you have to do whenever you bring up PowerShell out of the box. And once you do it once, you don't have to do it again. So you don't have to worry about that. All right, so I've already got PowerCLI installed here. I wasn't going to bore you guys with going through all the details of installing PowerCLI, but I wanted to mention one thing here. Whenever you install PowerCLI, it will install a start menu program here in the VMware folder. And you'll see that it has VMware, vSphere, PowerCLI folder here. And then you'll see two of these here, vSphere, PowerCLI 32-bit, and PowerCLI. These are essentially PowerShell hosts that have all the integration built into them that allow you to use PowerCLI. But to be honest with you, since I use PowerCLI I use PowerShell out of other different things, I never use this here because, well, the reason is because I want to have my own PowerShell session with my own variables, my own profiles, my own everything, because I do a lot more stuff in PowerShell than just vSphere. So, but what you can do is you don't have to use these. You can just bring up your standard PowerShell console, and now since as of PowerCLI version 6, you can actually bring in all those modules and do everything you can in here. But since I don't use this, I wanted to show it to you in case you were wondering what this was. You don't necessarily have to use this, and I'll show that to you in just a minute here. All right, so first thing I want to do is, since I said that the PowerCLI is actually a grouping of modules. You know, in the bigger products you see with vSphere, you'll see multiple modules like this. So in this instance, PowerCLI is essentially consists of you know, a few different modules here. You have cloud, core, HA, functions to deal with the license, the storage, BDs. There's a lot of other stuff in here that you can manipulate just about anything you need. However, if you're just getting started, the majority of the command list that you would use to manage your hosts or deployments, VMs especially, would be in this VMware VimAutomation.core module. And I'm going to show you a few of these things in here. You'll see that it contains a whole lot of functions in here. There's pretty much everything you want to do. Remove VM host, roles, templates, doing tags. Pretty much you can do anything in the PowerCLI that you can do in the GUI. Now, this format here is kind of hard to understand it if you really want to digest it. So in PowerShell, what I can do is I can use the git command, specify the module as I did up here. I can sort it by the noun. So in PowerShell, everything has a verb noun syntax. You see that you only have open VM console or wait dash task. So everything is a verb and then a noun. Since this is the case, I can actually sort things on here. It's a really good way to show you what I mean by this. So one thing I wanted to mention here is in PowerShell, think of PowerShell as like objects. So let me give you a good example here. Objects with various things you can do on the objects. So here's a really good one. So VM host as an object. Here's so I can stop a VM host, set, get, move. You see there's a single object with a whole lot of different verbs on that object. And you can see that's how a lot of these functions are built. See, here's a VM, restart VM, remove VM, get, suspend, test. And you want to follow this same kind of methodology when you're building your own tools. So you start out with an object like a VM or a VM guest or a virtual switch or a virtual port group. You know, you figure out what you want your object to be, and then you actually define these verbs on the object, and eventually you can kind of glue all this stuff together and create some really cool tools. So the first command that you're going to run when you're running PowerCLI is connect VI server. So let me go ahead and bring this up. And you see that connect VI server is in the VMware.vimautomation.core. So it's one of those functions that I just showed you earlier. And I'm going to go ahead and go look at get help here for the connect VI server command here. Oh, I accidentally hit update help. Well, while it's updating, might as well give you a story of update help. So PowerShell has the ability to dynamically bring in help content as it goes along. So remember the days when you have to go to Google or Bing or whatever search engine you chose and figure out, well, what is the syntax for this command, or what does it do whenever this command does this, or what does it do when this command does that. With PowerShell, it's able to go out to the internet, to go to Microsoft, pull down all that dynamic, all that help content right here in the console. So really, you really don't have to go out to Google that often. If you're just starting out, just using get help or help and then specify the name of the commandlet was really helpful. Oh, good. Looks like I burned enough time there to get that done. So connect VI server here. So you see that when you bring up help, has a really good description, and depending on the commandlet or the function here, this may or not be a great subscription or not. It all depends on the author. But you can see here for a connect VI server, it says the commandlet establishes connection to the vCenter server, starts a new session, and reestablishes the previous. You'll see that each of these commandlets in the PowerCLI they're very, very well documented, unlike some of the other modules that I've come across. So if you're ever wondering what something does, you can always just do get help. And here's one thing that I really love that I constantly use still is the examples. So if you just do get help and the name of the commandlet or the function here and put -examples, you can see these real-world examples of what each of these examples do here. So, you know, for example here, connect VI server protocol, and then it tells you exactly what that does. So it gives you real scenarios of what to do here. So that's get help. So let's go ahead and make a connection to the vSphere server. There's two ways to do this. I recommend using get credential here, so that way, you know, your password is not hard coded into the script like it is here. But you'll see that it has some kind of interactive prompt. So if I bring this up and run this, you see that it prompts me. Now you'll run into this problem whenever you try to create these automated scripts. Other than hard coding in the username and password like I'm doing here, there's a few different ways that you can save your credentials on the file system and dynamically pull them out. But we don't have time to go through that for now. But if you have any questions about that, feel free to hit me up. I'm on Twitter constantly, or there may be a link in the Altaro blog post ahead of time to show you how to more securely do that. So for now, I'm just going to go ahead and pass in the username and password here and get a connection to my vSphere server. So to do that, I'll just run this command here, and then it'll say you'll always get this prompt if you're using a self-signed certificate or when you're working with the multiple default servers like I am now. So I've already made that connection to the server, so I'll just say, yes, I will go ahead and do it. And then it'll say, here's the name, the port, and then here's the user that I'm using. So that gets me the connection to the server. All right, so next, whenever I'm learning a new product here, I tend to poke around with the get commandlets. And I can do that with get command. I can find all the commandlets that start with get here. So maybe I'll poke around here and I'll see, Well, I see get VM. Well, let's just find out what VMs are available on this host. So I'll go ahead and run this, and then you'll see that it gives me a list of all of the VMs that it currently has. You see the name, the power state, and the number of CPUs, and the memory in gigs. Now, this is just a subset of the features that you can get, of the properties that you can get for each VM with get VM. So to see everything, you can pipe this to select star, and what that is that says just give me all the properties that are available to all my VMs. And you'll see that it's flying by here pretty quickly, but casually going over here, you see this is quite a bit of other stuff. You know, we saw a subset of that stuff. That's called the formatting that PowerShell does by default. And if you dive down in here, you can find just about anything you want to know about a particular VM. So all the disks, the network drive, the floppy drive, everything possible about the VM. So let's see. So let's just say you want to narrow that down to 1. Okay, well, let's run this. And you'll see that if you have the name wrong, PowerShell will say VM with name TP-1 was not found using the specified filters. Okay, well, since I can easily enumerate all those VMs again, let's just narrow this down and figure out what I did wrong here. All right, so it looks like it's endo-TP01. So I got the name wrong. So if I go endo-TP01, and you see that we only got the VM that we wanted. So it's a good way to narrow down or to filter out VMs that I want. So that's using the name parameter. So that's great, but one of the big things I really love about PowerShell is the ability to glue things together, especially with this pipeline here. So for example, so let's say we just want to get VM and get all the status of it. Okay, well that's great. Well, what if we want to stop it? You can see that it's currently powered on. All right. So when I want to stop it, now instead of saying stop VM, saying the name, and all this other stuff, if I have the VM already captured here, I can simply pipe it to stop VM with my my pipe indicator here, and then run this. And say you want to stop. Sure, I want to stop it. And it says powering off virtual machine, and boom, now it's powered off. So it's a really good way to manipulate VMs through the pipeline. All right, so let's do something else here. So now, let's say this VM is off now. You see that it's powered off. Now let's get that VM started up again, and then after it's started, I'll pipe that result to get VM guest. So not really a good example, but it was just a quick one I discovered here. So we're going to get it started, and then we're going to pipe that result to get VM guest. And you'll see that as you may not have seen the whole process here, but what this did was it got the VM, so it got that VM object, so it captured that. And then it brought that over to start VM, which then it started, which then it brought that over again to get VM guest. You can use your imagination here as you develop these more advanced scripts. You can really pipe this out, keep piping as much as you can. You can get hard disk information, so get hard disk, or really whatever you want to do is you can use your imagination by gluing these things together with the pipeline. All right, so now let's build a simple tool here from the knowledge that we just had. So first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab up all those VMs into a VMs variable here. And when I enumerate the VMs, you see that I have all the VMs currently on this host available to me. And as I mentioned before, we don't see all of the properties of each of the VMs. And in order to do that, we can use this get member commandlet here, pipe that to select object, because I just want to see the name, and then we'll sort that by the property name. When I run this, you'll see that I have quite a few more properties than those 4 of them that I just saw here. I have CD drives, guess the host that it's on, the memory in megabytes and gigabytes, number of CPUs. You see that there's a lot of properties here that's available to you that you don't natively see. So if you ever want to know what properties are available, you can always use the get member here. All right, so I want to see more details about each VM. VMware has a cool command to do which is called get view. Now, get view does a lot of different things, but one thing that I'm using it for is to actually get more information about each VM. So I'm going to change my VM's variable here to the output of get view. So notice that I'm just piping it here. So each of the VMs that are coming out of get VM automatically go over here to get view and get processed by get view. So let's see what this looks like now. All right, so notice that if I just select runtime, that's just selecting a property on each of those objects. You see that, VMware, Vim, that really doesn't make much difference at all. This is because this is an object. You aren't seeing the embedded properties inside of that object. To do that, I need to enumerate through each of those VM objects, and to do that, I can use for each object here. And I can have runtime, and boot time is the embedded property in the runtime object that's inside of each of these objects you see here. So if I run this, then you'll see actual boot time. So that is the boot time for all the machines that are currently powered on. So once you have the boot time, now we can take that to the next level. So this is a good demonstration of using building blocks. So you start really simple, then you just build on top, and you build on it again, then you build on it again, and build on it again. And eventually, you can have a little tool like this, or a tool that Andy's going to be showing you in a minute here, which is a really big script that does all kinds of different things. And at first, it may look daunting. It may look like I can never do that. You can if you just have the patience and learn. You start small and you keep building and building on top of that. But anyway, so what this is doing in here, I want to find the uptime of all my running VMs. Now, to do that, right now I have boot time. I don't have an uptime variable or an uptime property, for example. So to do that, I can use PowerShell's select object. It's called calculated properties. So select object just shows me specific properties that I want to see. So you see I have a select object here. I want to see the name of the VM. Now this part here may look a little crazy to you if you're not familiar with calculated fields. PowerShell has a concept of calculated fields that allow you to essentially manipulate the properties that are coming out of those objects to do something on it. So in this instance, since I have boot time here, I know that to get the current uptime, I need to subtract the current time from the boot time. That will get me the total uptime. And to do that, I want to have a property called uptime days. So I don't want to see just boot time. I want to see uptime days. And I have an expression here, which I can say, use the new time span commandlet, which essentially gives me the difference between two times. So it's perfect in this instance. So to say new time span here has a start parameter, and that is the earlier time. So I'm going to say I want to specify the boot time, which is the one I just did up here, and then the end is get date, which is the current time. And once I do that, you'll see that I have this in parentheses here, and then I have dot days. So new time span will give me a time span object, which then has a days property. And that days property just gives me the number of days. I could get the number of seconds, the number of milliseconds, the number of weeks, but I just want to see days in this instance. And then I finally have format table auto size, which makes it look good on the console here. So now when I run this, now you can see that I don't have just the boot time here. I actually have a nicely formatted list. So I have the name, all the VM names, and the uptime in days of how many days each of these machines have been running. And you see when there's nothing blank here, those machines are off or probably couldn't get the uptime for some reason. But you can see that I just meant for this little demo to be a seed for you. Just to give you an example of what you can do with PowerShell and what you can do with the PowerCLI. You know, your options are pretty much limitless on the amount of tools that you can build here. So it's a very nice, PowerShell is a really cool way to kind of glue multiple technologies together, and especially with PowerCLI. PowerCLI is, you know, VMware's way to interface with vSphere. So it's a really good tool to use. So now that I'm done with my demo here. I think Andy has a demo here for you, and let me see if I can figure out how to get this changed over to Andy. Andy, are you ready for me to switch over to you?
Yep, good to go.
Great.
All right, let's see here. We want monitor 2. Show my screen. How's it looking, Adam? You see it?
Yep, looks good.
All right, so real quick, let's see. There we go. Okay. See the slide deck?
Yep.
Okay. So to kind of build on what Adam's talked about so far, kind of wanted to give you another example, I liked how Adam put it, a kind of a seed for you, kind of an idea of what PowerShell and PowerCLI can do for you. So what my demo entails is we're going to use a specific commandlet called Invoke-VMscript. And from a deployment perspective, this is a fantastic little command. What it does is it allows you to take a block of code and actually inject it into a virtual machine from the vCenter instance. There's no network connection required. It does this through VMware tools. You can actually inject a block of code into the guest, authenticate, and run the code inside of the guest. So we're going to do a couple of things with this. We're going to define some credentials that we're going to use to actually run this command. The deploying VM section I've already done ahead of time for the sake of time, but I've got some examples in there to kind of show you how that's done. Then we're going to modify some network settings, and then some of the blocks of code that I'm going to show you actually install, configure, and do a little bit of management of Active Directory. Again, just like the deploying VMs, that piece has the installation and configuration of AD and the forest have already been done for the sake of time, but you'll be able to see the code that I use to actually do that. And then finally, let's say, for example, you run this DC for 2 or 3 months, and later on down the line you decide, hey, I need to install file services on this machine. I'm going to show you how you can use Invoke-VMscript to do that without even logging into the machine to do it. So from this point, let's get out PowerShell ISE, and we'll actually look at the script real quick. So I've got some stuff here up at the top. You know, about connecting to the vCenter instance. Adam's already covered this. So I've got a couple of variables defined here, and I've connected into my vCenter instance already. Then this next section, you'll see 2 separate sections here for actually defining the credentials that I'm going to use to log into this virtual machine that I'm going to connect to. So I've got the local user for my virtual machine before it's a DC, because, you know, before it's a DC we don't have domain credentials to use. And I've defined the password by setting a variable and using convert to secure string, this string of text here, to create you know, a password basically. And then I pipe all of that information to this command, and I create a new object of this type, use this argument list looking at this local user variable and this local password, and it kind of packages together all that information as a set of credentials that I can call later in the script. So I did that again here just with some domain credentials, because remember, I've provisioned the VM and I've used the script to actually install and configure AD on this virtual machine. And as far as deployment goes, this is what this block of code here does. So what I've done, I've already connected to my vCenter instance, right? So I'm setting a couple of more variables, kind of a lot of like Adam said, building blocks, building up to actually completing my task. So first I set the cluster inside of my vCenter instance that I'm targeting. I define what template am I going to use to actually create this VM. I'm going to point it at a customization spec that I'm going to use to customize the VM. And then this last one simply is a variable that names the virtual machine object. So I'm going to take all of those variables and I'm going to use the new VM commandlet, and I'm going to call all of these various variables to actually create the VM. And once that's done, I'm going to start it. So again, for the sake of time, I've already taken care of that. I let the customization happen and the VM is up and running. So anytime we're working with Active Directory, right, we want to make sure we have a static address. So I have another block of code here that's just a single one-liner. It's just netsh command is all it is. It just sets the IP address of the VM, sets the subnet mask and the gateway. And I actually use Invoke-VMscript to change the IP address inside of the virtual machine. So this is the first time that we've seen Invoke-VMscript inside of this presentation here. So you can see the syntax of the command. So I'm just going to invoke VMscript. I'm going to point it at the script text parameter, and I'm going to call the variable that contains that code that I want to execute. I'm going to target the virtual machine name, which is stored in this variable, and then I'm going to call those credentials that I defined further up in the script so I can actually authenticate once the script gets pushed into the guest VM. So I'm going to show that here in just a second. There's two other blocks of code that I want to show here real quick. One is the install AD role, and again, it's just an install Windows feature -name. I'm just installing the Active Directory domain services, and again, we're just putting these blocks of code in single quotes here. And then as far as configuring the domain, that's what this block of code does here. So you can see all my various domain mode, forest mode, domain name, DSRM password, all of that stuff is defined in this block of text. And just like we did with the network settings, I'm using Invoke-VMscript to first push in and install the Active Directory role, and then I'm using Invoke-VMscript again, VMscript here again to actually configure the domain. Now, I already have that VM up and running, and it's running the domain, and again, it's already configured. So let's say that I want to actually make some changes to that using Invoke-VMscript. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create this new administrative user called test admin. And just to show that the account doesn't already exist, let's try logging into that VM. Username and password is incorrect. It's not there yet, basically. So what I'm going to do is let's first set this variable by executing this block of code. So I've set that. Now I'm going to use Invoke-VMscript to actually reach into the VM and configure that new AD user account. So let's execute that. You can see Invoke-VMscript running, and it usually doesn't take too long. So okay, there was no output, which means the script executed successfully. And I'll show we'll show that the account works in a second here, but I want to also go ahead and install the file services role and create the file share at this point as well. So again, let's pretend that later on down the road we need to actually install file services on this machine and configure a new SMB share. So first we need to define the block of code that actually installs the file services role. So that's what this block of code does here, and then we're going to create a new file share. So what this block of code does is first we're defining the location on the machine that I want to use as the share location. We're going to create a new folder named public at that location using the new item commandlet. So we're going to specify the path as the share location. We're going to specify the name of the folder as this string here, public, and the item type is directory. And then after that, we're going to create a new SMB share using this bottom command. So let's run all this code real quick to set these variables. And now let's actually do the work. So we're going to Invoke-VMscript to first install the file services role. It's a pretty light role, so it doesn't take very long to install. So should be pretty quick here. Usually it doesn't take longer than 10-15 seconds. So that should be taken care of there. Okay, that's all set to go. And then down here, we're going to actually do the same thing, Invoke-VMscript, but this time we're going to create the SMB share inside of the VM. And remember, this doesn't require a network connection on the VM. So from a deployment perspective, being it's reaching into the VM through VMware tools, that's really helpful because now we don't have to wait for a network connection to actually make deployment type changes to our virtual machine. So you see we got some output there based on that last Invoke-VMscript. Now let's see how things actually turned out inside of the virtual machine. So first thing I'm going to do is let's check and see if that test admin account actually exists now. So the test admin account is working, so we've successfully created that user account using Invoke-VMscript. And then the next thing I want to show is let's just check the IP settings. So right now you can see that the IP is set to 219. Let's say later on I want to actually change the IP for some reason. So let's come back up here to this, this DC network settings variable I defined. And let's say I want to change that to 218. So let's set this variable again by running it, and then we'll call it Invoke-VMscript once again to actually reach inside of the VM and change the IP settings. So that one also runs fairly quickly. So it's actually running netsh inside of the VM. So let's go back to our VM now. Look at the IP settings again, and now we can see that the IP has changed to 218. Again, I didn't need the network to make that change whatsoever. I just used Invoke-VMscript to make the change. So let's verify two more things. I'm going to switch over to PowerShell, and I'm going to actually look at the Windows features. Get Windows feature, excuse me, and I want to make sure that the file services role was installed. And we can see the file services role is installed. Let's take a look and see if the SMB share was created. And there we see that the public SMB share was created successfully. So really powerful stuff as far as being able to script. I mean, it takes a lot of the work out of these very redundant tasks if you're deploying a lot of virtual machines. Which brings me to the next slide in my deck. Let's take a look at this. Change my display settings back again real quick. So that was just kind of a more simple example of that process. If you want a really more detailed explanation and a more detailed example that takes that idea to the next level, out on our Altaro VMware blog, I've put together a script that takes that to the next level. It automatically deploys a DC, it provisions it, automatically deploys a file server VM, it adds it to the domain, it creates a new user account, new shares, it does all kinds of different things. And I designed this script in a very sequential manner, step one, step two. That way people that are just getting started with PowerShell can take a look at it, they can learn from it, and they can use it in their own environment. So if you're interested in taking a look at that script, the URL's right there. Feel free to take a look, and let me know if you have questions, comments, or if you're interested in other topics. So from there, we've got a slide here, where to learn more. I'll let Adam cover this one real quick because he put this one together. These are just some more useful resources to learn more.
Yep. Okay. Good demo, Andy.
Go ahead, let us know, Adam, what each of these ones are. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right, great. So, I hope you guys enjoyed the demos that we put on for you today. Since, we didn't have time to get nearly into everything that PowerShell has to offer, I put together just a few points here for some information that you can go to see more. So the first two there are essentially online representations of the commandlet reference and user guide. All those are included when you install PowerCLI in the start menu folder that I showed you there. I sometimes like looking at the web to get what I need to learn. So those are those first two guides there. Those are your starter points. And then if you have any questions about PowerCLI in general, PowerCLI has a really good community around that. And that's a good link there to go to the forums for the PowerShell CLI forums, where there's a ton of guys in there that pretty much know everything there is to know about PowerCLI. If Andy and Altaro can help you. And then finally, what I found is, as somebody fairly new to PowerCLI myself, is the PowerCLI Labs. Now, that's a really cool way to learn more about PowerCLI. With that, you don't even have to bring up your own demo environment. They provide you with a virtual environment that is pretty much pre-built and ready to go when you don't have to set up your own test environment. I'd highly encourage you to go and to go this route before actually poking around into production. So I guess you can go on the next slide, Andy.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Yep.
So real quick, I wanted to talk about our application just briefly. If you're interested in virtual machine backup, we make a great product for that. We focus on three big things. We focus on ease of use. The application has to be easy to use because we realize not every organization is going to have an IT person actually running the backups. On top of that, we also focus on great support and low costs. So definitely, if you're interested in the virtual backup product, check us out. Got all kinds of information on our website. On top of that, if you're an IT reseller, we have a reseller program as well if you're interested. If you want some more information on that reseller program, you can visit altaro.com/partners or email us at sales@altaro.com. And then I mentioned this earlier, if you're interested in our application, just kind of trying it out, you can download a 30-day trial at altaro.com/download. And again, it's a full-featured 30-day trial, or it's free for 2 VMs forever, which is really useful for home labs especially. So now let's get to our Q&A section here. We have a little bit of time for Q&A, and again, if we don't get to all the questions that have been asked, we will be posting a copy of the video out on our Altaro VMware blog, as well as any questions and their associated answers. We'll be posting those out on that blog as well in the coming weeks. So at this point, let's go through our questions list, and we'll see what we've got, and we'll answer a couple of them with the time we have. So let's see. So one of the first questions that I've got here is about Get Help. I saw it pop up when you were talking about the Get Help section here, Adam, is Get Help just for PowerShell, or can it also be used for PowerCLI? Do you want to talk real quick about that and about how each vendor can inject their own help information into their modules?
Sure, yeah. Get Help is definitely not just for PowerCLI. That is a PowerShell specific thing. And depending on the module and how each of the functions are built depends on what output you get with Get Help. So actually, when a lot of the modules, not familiar, I'm not sure if PowerCLI does this or not, their modules, that you can build that updatable help. So as you saw where I actually had to go through the update help when I didn't mean to, you saw that it went through and did a bunch of updates. Now that has to be programmed into the module itself and the individual cmdlets and functions. They allow you to say update help and grab all that information out there as well. But yeah, get help if you're not familiar with that or just getting started with PowerShell. I would highly recommend you can just do get help and then do whatever command you want to get help with, and especially use that dash example. So get help works with the VMware stuff, the Hyper-V stuff. I mean everything, the default PowerShell stuff, AD, Exchange. Whatever. So it's definitely not just a PowerCLI thing.
Cool, thank you. Another one we got here that I can probably speak to a little bit is can we easily apply this scripting to multiple vCenters? We've got a person that asked a question, said they have roughly 6 or so separate vCenter instances, and you probably saw in that script that I showed a little bit earlier how I actually defined a couple of vCenter targeting variables. I imagine you could write a script where you could set multiple variables and throughout the script log into several different vCenter instances as needed. At least that's how I would do it. I don't know if you would do it a little bit differently, Adam. I would think that should be easily scriptable. It's just a targeting thing, really.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, if you have multiple vCenter servers, you want to make a connection to each of them, you could actually put them all in like a little array in your script, so have like the names of the IPs of each of them, and then just loop through all of them and then do connect VI server, and then just have instead of a specific instance, it would just be a variable that you could easily make connections to all of them and make that happen.
Yeah, very powerful what you can do with PowerShell and PowerCLI. This is kind of a DevOpsy type question. That's how I would define this one. So maybe you might know the answer to this. So with PowerShell and PowerCLI, can you use that with a systems management tool like Jenkins or Chef or Puppet? Any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I don't have any experience with Jenkins or Chef, or just a little bit with Puppet, but I can speak to that a little bit. Really, those tools, those configuration management tools, they all have the ability to execute PowerShell scripts. And really, at that point, you can build a script like mine or a script like Andy's, do some sort of action on it, and use tools like Chef or Puppet or one of those other configuration management tools to essentially be the deliverer of the script. That's how I've done a lot of my stuff with System Center Configuration Manager. I would use a separate tool to actually deliver the script on the machine, and then once the script is on the machine, I would say go and execute it, and then PowerShell would take care of all the complicated stuff. And at that point, the tool would just be the deliverer and would actually maybe bring back the results of what you wanted to do. So, if you wanted to provision a VM in Jenkins or something, you would just point it at I'm not familiar with Jenkins particularly, but you could just point it, Jenkins have a job that pointed at a PowerShell script, deliver the PowerShell script, do whatever it has to do, and then bring back the output. Yeah, that's definitely doable. I know all of them have the ability to execute PowerShell scripts.
Very good. But another one here is, so how different is PowerCLI and vSphere/vCenter 6? Does the same PowerCLI work, or is there a 6.0 specific version? So it really sounds like it's a version question. The way I look at that is, if you have the ability to install the latest version, I would, because you're going to get, you're going to get access to all the latest commandlets and the latest and greatest stuff. But some of the older stuff will probably work, but you may run into issues. So I don't know, it's just my general rule of thumb that I always run the latest version that's available. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Adam.
Yeah, I usually do it, and especially with the big difference was when when PowerCLI was the snap-ins and when they went through the modules in 6. That was a big change for me. So I say at least get the 6, but there's really no reason why you just can't get the latest and greatest. You just have to make sure if you have a lot of scripts built for the earlier version, then just make sure that the changes that are made in the new version don't break your existing scripts.
Right. That's when the testing comes into play, right? Test.
Yep.
So let's see. We've got time for maybe one more question here. Let's see. So is Invoke-VMscript a PowerCLI included command? Can it be used to update components within a VM such as the VDA and Zen Desktop? So I don't have a lot of experience myself with Zen Desktop, but as far as the Invoke-VMscript portion of that question goes, that is a command that's included in PowerCLI, and you can pass any kind of PowerShell code into the VM using Invoke-VMscript. So assuming that you can design some PowerShell code that is able to manipulate that Zen Desktop stuff, that is something that you could foreseeably take care of. As Adam mentioned earlier, kind of the modular capabilities of PowerShell, you got all these vendors that are starting to create all of these third-party modules that plug into it. So it could be, and again, I don't know for sure, it's something we're checking out, it could be that Citrix has actually taken the time to make some PowerShell commands themselves. So I don't know if you're a Citrix guy or not, Adam. I personally, I haven't worked with it much since Presentation Server 4 myself.
No, I don't. I'm not a big Citrix guy, but I do know some Citrix guys, and I do know that Citrix does have some PowerShell modules, just like PowerCLI does. So you can probably manipulate that with PowerShell.
Yeah, so that'd be an option. So, but anyway, I think that is about all the time we have for today. I want to thank everyone for attending. Thank everyone for the great questions. And if you asked a question that didn't get answered, we'll definitely follow that up with a blog post out at altaro.com/VMware. That's our VMware blog. And we will also include a copy of this webinar. We've been recording it, so you'll be, if you want to go back and see some stuff again, we've got some stuff out there. We'll have a video out there that you can take a look at. So again, want to say thanks for everyone, and say thank you, Adam, for taking the time out of your day to present to us, and hope everyone has a great day. Thank you much.